Welcome to the Podluck Podcast, a conversation podcast about the intersection of culture and faith. We thank you for joining and listening and watching our podcast, not just today, but for the entirety of our podcast. We're so thankful for all of you who are listening. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Chris Chong. Chris, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. We have our Vacation Bible School next week, and so we've been busy preparing for that, but we're excited about it. Jason, how are you doing? I noticed that you have a new hair color today.
Yes, for those who are watching on YouTube, you can see I do have a new hair color.
You look like Mira from the K-pop Demon Hunters. Is that what you were going for?
It wasn't. This is actually not what I wanted it to look like. I actually wanted less color. Like, so my hair is all red. I wanted more like highlights. But it's okay.
It's more like a magenta pink. And so I wanted to ask if you're doing okay, because I heard that when people do drastic hair changes, it signifies something significant happening in their life. Are you having another child or something?
No. I've been spending more time with this guy. We do this podcast together, and he's a little annoying. So maybe that's what. No, there's no. So this is the third time I've dyed my hair. I don't know why I keep dyeing it. The last time I told everyone, this is probably the last time. I think I'm done. Here we are.
I don't think it looks bad. I think it looks good. It just reminds me of Mira, which is cool.
No one said that to me until you mentioned it. Yeah, I told you earlier, I've actually never watched Demon Hunters from beginning to end. I've seen the entire movie in chunks as my kids watch it. So yeah, it didn't occur to me that I look like Mira.
Maybe we can do a little like contest where we can ask our audience to give us hair color suggestions for you, and then whatever wins, you can color your hair that color. How does that sound?
Yeah, you should get the okay from my wife, but
smart.
Yeah, because I don't have to look at it; she has to look at it. So, yeah,
that's true.
It is true. Yeah, nothing new with you besides VBS prep. Your hair still black.
My hair's still black. No, we're pumped. It's gonna be fun. We this year we're not using a like prepackaged program from like groups or standard publishing. Pastor Jonathan, our youth pastor, decided to essentially use AI to create our own program. So our program is unique. It's on the life of David. And so I don't know what he did, but he just went through it. And so we created our own program this year. So that's cool and exciting, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think back when I used to run VBSs, we would always change their stuff. We'd use like the theme, like the visual theme, but then, all the crafts and games we do our own because we didn't think it was that good. So yeah, kudos, props to P-John.
Yeah.
All right, so today it's another one of those pop-up podcasts. So we're actually releasing this right after we record it because the topic today is, again, somewhat not time sensitive, but it's something that's happening right now. So we're going to be talking about two sporting events that happened recently. We're going to be talking
I'm excited to do a sports episode, by the way. Like, we haven't done this.
Yes. Chris and I, we both love sports. I was very intentional about not bringing sports in because this could quickly turn into just a sports podcast, which, as much as I would love to do, and I think you would love to do, I don't know if most of our listeners want to hear about us talking about the Packers and Commanders.
That is fair.
But yeah, this is one of the first sports-based podcasts we'll be doing. And for our listeners, this is not a sports episode. We're using sports as a launching point to talk about, again, culture and faith. And so we're going to be talking about the World Cup, which is happening now, and the Knicks winning the championship, which is one of the rare sports moments that I feel like transcends into larger pop culture because it's New York and it's the Knicks and all those things. And so we're going to be talking about those two sporting events and how that kind of trickles down to like our church and our faith. And so we're going to start by talking about the World Cup, which is happening.
So we're recording this on Friday, and last night was the Korea-Mexico game. And so we wanted to talk about not necessarily the game, but the storylines around the game that are relevant and meaningful for us at our time. And so, Jason, did you watch the game?
I did. There were a number of watch parties that I was invited to. I'm not talking about like big, like public ones, just like church run. And so I was going to go to the Cerritos watch party because it's a lot closer to my house. But then I ended up going to the Yorba Linda watch party, which was in Riverside. It took me 2.5 hours to get from Anaheim to Riverside. It took me like almost 45 minutes to get on the fast track lane. This is not related to anything. If you're not from California, this makes no sense to you. I'm sorry, but I just need to tell people. It took me 2 hours to get to
That's
Riverside.
insane.
It was insane.
For people who don't know, how long would that normally take without traffic?
It's like a 35-minute drive.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Man. Anyway, so I went to a watch party. We watched. It was a good game. Not so much the result, but it was a close game, which is always good. Did you watch the game?
So I must confess that I did not watch the game. And actually, weirdly, I feel like ashamed a little bit that I didn't watch the game.
Yeah. So maybe a side episode can be why you hate Koreans, Chris. Maybe that can be a.
So
what were you doing?
Okay, so I did watch bits and pieces. We played pickleball last night, and someone brought the game on their phone and they put it on the fence, and so we would play, and then we would go watch a little bit, and then go play, and then go watch a little bit, and then our kids came. So we play at a park where there's a playground right next to the courts, and so our kids will play, and then later they came, and a bunch of them like were crowded around the phone watching the game while we were playing. So I missed most of it, and then like at one point we're all like, "Oh, it's over? What happened?" So my apologies. I missed it because I was playing pickleball.
Pickleball, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I see. All right. Well, fortunately for Chris, we're not going to be breaking down the game or anything like that. But we did want to talk about this like phenomenon that's happened between Korea and Mexico, and I'm sure most of you are aware of it. But there is this I don't know how to explain it. This like loving relationship between Korea and Mexico. And so for those of you who don't know, in 2018 World Cup, Korea and Mexico were in the same group. And in the final game of group play, which is what happens before the playoffs, Korea was playing Germany, and Mexico needed Korea to beat Germany to advance to the playoffs. And it was a huge upset for Korea to beat Germany. Germany is significantly better at soccer than Korea. And even the nature, they scored their goal in stoppage time, I believe. So after the 90th minute, the referee adds a little bit of extra time, and that's when they scored both their goals. And so there was this like great outpouring of love towards Korean people from Mexico. There's this crazy video, I don't know if you've seen it, where this like swarm of Mexican people in Mexico, they went up to the Korean embassy and they're like having a party outside the Korean embassy.
That's actually so cool, man. That's actually awesome.
One of our pastors, Pastor Paul Chung, he's at OCK now. In 2018, he was serving at a multi-ethnic church in San Diego area, and the associate pastor, who is Mexican, she got him this like authentic hand-stitched Korean jersey as like a thank you for this.
Oh wow!
And so that was like at the end of the World Cup in 2018. So Korea was eliminated, and then Mexico went on. Yeah, so 2022, we were in separate groups, but then 2026, we are in the same group as Mexico. And not only are we in the same group as Mexico, as you all know, all the games are played in Mexico because they're one of the host countries. And there's videos all over the place of like Korean people in Mexico, in these Mexican cities, and they're like loving each other. There's this like camaraderie. There's like all this stuff, and it's like really cool to see Korea and Mexico kind of coming together. And on Instagram, or I think the social media, someone posted like, man, it would be so cool if there was a place where Korean people and Mexican people could just live together all the time. And then the response was like, you're never going to believe this, but... And what they're insinuating is there actually is such a place called Los Angeles where Korean people and Mexican people live. And that made me think a little bit, Chris, about what it is. Because, yeah, Korean people and Mexican people, we live literally right next to each other, even where I live in Buena Park. Buena Park is Korean, and then Fullerton and all the areas around it is heavily Mexican. And so I live in it, and it's not quite like it's not quite the same as what's happening in the World Cup. And so, Chris, you grew up in LA. You spent a lot of time, in LA. Like, what was your experience with the relationship between Korean people and Mexican people?
So one thing is that I grew up at LA Central, which also is right in a predominantly Hispanic area. We're in Boyle Heights, East LA. Like, there's a movie called Born in East LA, right? With like Cheech Marin. It's like, that is a place for Mexicans. And then we have this Korean church in there. So like on a weekend basis, we'd be in a largely Latino Hispanic area. My parents' store, so growing up, if you didn't know, my parents had two businesses. It's kind of the like Kim's Convenience story, right? We had like a liquor store in North Hollywood and a produce market in North Hollywood. Again, those areas, predominantly Hispanic, Latino neighborhoods. And so actually, even though I grew up in an area with not a lot of Hispanic people, I grew up with an area with lots of Asians and Chinese people. I regularly interacted with Latinos and Mexicans very, very often. And I will say that there is I don't know, at least for me, I feel a bit of camaraderie towards that community. I feel like very much like I love Mexican culture. I have said and joked that if I wasn't Korean, I would be Mexican because like I love the food. I've been to Mexico more than any other country I've been to in the world. I mean, it's like right there, but there's been lots of reasons to go there. Probably I speak Spanish, like Spanish is my third best language. And at one point, I would say that my Spanish was better than my Korean, like in college. I was going every year. So I feel very connected. I don't know if they want me to say that or they would not want me to be connected, but I feel like kind of connected to Mexico. I spent, 6 weeks in the mission field in Mexico. And with that, like I have a fondness, but I don't see that, like what is being told in the narrative and the storyline of Korea, Mexico, this love, I don't see it like on the regular, growing up and at church or at the store. It was kind of a us and them feel, even though for me, like I love the culture and I have seen that, like, I feel like, and I don't know if this is true, but I don't know if the Mexican community feels the same way about the Koreans or there's a more fondness there. I don't know. I don't think I can answer that question, but
I mean,
from our side, it was like, yeah, it's cool, but like, it's not like close. It's not love, I would say.
right. And I think that's what kind of brought that thought on was because I'm seeing this happen on social media. I'm not in Guadalajara or, Mexico City, but I see it. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then naturally I think like, but this doesn't happen here.
Yeah, like, is this real?
Yeah, and it is kind of happening. So like a big place, Santa Ana is close to where I live. That is like a predominantly like Hispanic, Mexican, Latino place, but it's also super close to like the two Koreatowns we have. And so I think there was a watch party in Santa Ana, and it's just like a swarm of like red and green. And there were like more friendlier interactions. I think the one in Koreatown. Have you seen the drone footage of the watch party in Koreatown in LA?
No, I'd be really excited to see it, though.
Insane. I don't even know where in Koreatown they were, but I'm pretty sure they closed off like multiple streets. But I haven't seen that many people in a single area in a very long time. It was
That's crazy.
It's like downtown LA too. But I think it's happening in America because of what people are seeing happening in Mexico and during the World Cup. But yeah, like you said, I don't see this happening throughout the year. And so that had me kind of wondering, like, is this maybe more of a relationship between Korea, the country, and people who live in Korea? So, okay, Korean Koreans, as we call them in our podcast, versus Korean Americans and Mexicans. And Chris kind of brought up this point where if you're someone who lives in Korea, outside of coming to Mexico to watch World Cup games, how often do you actually interact with Mexican culture and Mexican people in like Gangnam or, like Jeju-do? Like you don't. But then when you live in America, our cultures are very much overlapped and intertwined. And so does that play a role in this kind of, I guess, disconnect between what we see and what we experience?
Yeah, I feel like this speaks to like those moments where we like the idea of something, but the actuality of it is maybe not, we don't like it as much. There are many things I feel like in life where we like the idea of this, and then when we actually experience it, like maybe not so much. I think like traveling for some people, like the idea of going to some foreign country and experiencing the culture, like the idea of it is great. And then some people, you actually do it, you're like, actually, I don't like this. I like sleeping at home. I like sleeping in my bed. But the idea of a connecting and being with this group, or the idea of another country and like this bond sounds really great, but it's a different story when you live every day together. And sometimes it happens with people in relationships, like the idea of a person, and you're like, the idea of that person and who you think that is, but once you are actually together, you live life together, it changes, and it's not always the same thing. And so I wonder if that's what's going on. Like the idea of Mexico and the idea of Korea, that's nice. But when you actually have to live in the same city and work with each other, do things and see things, like maybe it's not as beautiful and utopian as it sounds like in kind of the story and the narrative right now.
Right. And, that got me thinking, we always tell, especially like younger people, like, don't believe what you see on Instagram because it's not of the full reality. And maybe this is kind of what it is, right? This is not the full reality of the relationship between these two countries. It's just this particular moment in space curated on Instagram that's kind of creating it.
And that is not to say that it's not a beautiful moment.
Right. Of course not. Right.
Like, we have been accused of being a little too negative on this podcast. And I could see someone thinking like, there they go again, bursting the bubble of like something beautiful and wonderful happening in this world. So it is beautiful and it is wonderful.
Very
and
beautiful.
it is really cool to see that. I think all we're saying is there is more to the story. Not that there's more to the story, but it's not always like that. I guess that's my point. It's not always like that. If it was, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's more difficult for people to understand if you don't live in Southern California. And I'm not trying to make it sound like Southern California. I'm not saying that. I'm not even from here. I just live here. But yeah, as an outsider who moved to Southern California, what I experience and what I see is not, again, 100% aligned with what is happening in Mexico with Korea right now.
I think the relationship between Koreans, the Korean community, and the Mexican community is like generally positive, but it's like at arm's length.
It
Like
is.
there requires some sort of boundary and distance in order for it to be like a really good relationship. And obviously like the distance between the country of Korea and the country of Mexico is great. And so it's easy to be like, yay, we love Mexicans or we love Koreans. But when that distance is minimized and reduced, like sometimes that story changes.
It is. And at least in America, with Korean Americans and Mexicans, there is a bit of a power dynamic situation. Especially when it comes to the older generation, the first immigrants who came to America. A lot of them, much like your parents, much like my parents, they opened small businesses. So, in like your case, like a liquor store or a produce market. My parents, they opened like a fried chicken place or a restaurant. And a lot of the people they hire were Hispanic Mexican people. And that creates automatically a power dynamic shift. You know what I mean? And that could be a source of maybe not so much tension. I'm sure there is tension involved, but that is an element that doesn't exist in like kind of this utopian view of like Korea and Mexico in the World Cup perspective.
Yeah, it just creates a distinction between us,
Yeah.
and it's not intentional. It's like it was pretty much, I would say, a relationship of convenience. Like these people need jobs, we need people that we can hire and pay like not that much money to, and so it worked out. But it creates kind of this division, so to speak. But I kind of want to turn this conversation and point it to the faith element of our podcast, because I think we do this in church. And what I mean by that is I think we often dream of the idea of something, and then when it actually happens, we actually don't know how to respond to it. So I think the best example is, I think most Korean churches, at least Korean American EM churches, the idea of a multicultural and multi-ethnic church is an ideal to strive for. Like we don't want to just have a church full of Koreans. We want different people. And I've said this on this podcast, that a diverse congregation, a diverse church speaks more to the power of the gospel in bringing us together, rather than if we're all the same. But the reality is the idea of that is fantastic, but sometimes people actually will show up to your church who are different than you. And then we realize, oh, actually ministry is a little bit different, because they come in with different expectations and different understanding of church, different values. And then we actually have to go through the nitty gritty work of working and living and doing church together. And so I think that our churches need to be aware that, yeah, the idea is great, but it does take work, and things do have to change in order to create a community that is truly, in fact, a genuine community for all different ethnicities and cultures.
Yeah, and I think on that church level, I would encourage churches, like that initial part, to Chris's point, is difficult, right? Because there's not only is the work itself difficult, but again, grappling with that disconnect between like, oh, in my head it seems so much better, but here, that plays a psychological role in the difficulty of doing these things. But I kind of feel like if you're able to overcome that part, it actually becomes a lot easier to then recognize that vision that you had as a church. I don't know if you have any examples or instances of that, but
well, I mean, if you just think about historically, and you think about the early church, they actually went through cultural challenges. As the early church was growing, they had division and conflict between like the Greeks and the Romans and the Jews, and like they weren't sure how to get along together. And then there's a point in which The Greek widows were being ignored and neglected, and so like the church had to respond to bring them in and to care for them. And so we are an example of the product when faithful people are willing to work through those differences, come under like the name of Jesus and build the church around that versus cultural differences. And so like they had to deal with it and they worked through it, and then the church is what it is. I mean, it could have been very much the case where people could not get past cultural barriers, and then the church would have been divided, and I don't know, maybe it would have fallen, maybe who knows what would have happened. And I think like we have to realize the idea of a multi-ethnic or multicultural church, I hope we all know that it shouldn't just end with, oh, we just have different kinds of people here, like attending worship service and eating potluck. Like what it should be is the people who are different are actually engaged and like in the ministry. And so in time, in as they grow connected to the church, these people should be serving in leadership, the people who are different than us, you know? They should be involved in the different ministries, not just like attending and receiving and then going home. That's not a truly multi-ethnic, a healthy multi-ethnic church. They need to be brought in, and like we should be friends, and we should like do life together with the people, even though we are different.
Yeah, and I think, you know, your example of like the early church totally does track. And I think a more practical, like something that one of our churches has done, you know, we're talking about VBS at Rock. The VBS at LA Central was, I felt, very much embracing the community. Most of our Korean church VBSs, the kids who come are Korean kids. They're our kids. So it's just a church program for the church members. And then it is an avenue for you to invite your non-Adventist friends, because VBS is such a ubiquitous Christian thing. Plus, something I didn't realize until I became a parent is like childcare in the summer is like very difficult to come by. Yeah. So people find VBSs to go for that, which I now as a parent are like, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they'll go from one VBS to the other.
Yeah,
VBS
they're just VBS hops. Yeah. But at LA Central, I think when you were there, when I was there, it was almost like when I was there, it was like 85% community kids. We didn't have kids like at LAC when I was there. And so we'd have like about 100-ish kids, 80 to 100. And so we're talking about, you know, 60 to 80 of these kids who are from the community, who are Hispanic or Mexican, and then a very small smattering of Korean kids. And for me, it was so cool because while those families weren't members of our church, they came every year, and we developed a kind of a relationship with them. And then throughout the year, once in a while, they'll just come by, and it was like so good to see them. And so all the leaders would like, oh, you're here. And they like hug them. And it was so awesome to see as a pastor. But I'm sure, and I don't know if you were the one to like really implement it, but the second thing that you absolutely did implement was the block party at LA Central. And so the way that it would work is VBS would start beginning of the summer, and then the block party was at the end of the summer. And you can explain what block party is, and I can kind of share like how those two work together. So what was block party?
The block party was a back to school block party. And so it was just a fun time to invite the neighborhood, and the kids could play games, and then they would win like tickets or tokens or whatever. And then they could exchange them for school supplies. And so, you know, we didn't want to just do like handouts and stuff like that, because you kind of want to respect like the dignity of people. So we gave kids a chance to play all these games, and then we would feed them. I think in the spirit of like the cultures, we did like Korean Mexican fusion, you know, like Korean barbecue, tacos and burritos and stuff like that. And so we'd have the neighborhood come out, play games, eat together, and then they could leave with school supplies for the upcoming school year.
Yeah, and when I was there, we started partnering with some of like the other local churches. So like Upper Room Fellowship would come every year and help us out, and it would bookend the summer, right? So VBS was at the beginning, and then block parties at the end, and the same kids essentially come to both. But the block party, they come with their families. And again, it was so awesome to see that. And so for you, when you were essentially pitching the idea of the block party, I'm sure the idea and then that first block party, the reality, there was a disconnect, right?
Yeah.
For your church leaders and your church members. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like?
I think people were just like willing to try it and like, okay, whatever you say, man. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And the first year, probably like, I don't know, 30 people showed up. And so it was like not huge.
Sure.
And people worked really hard, but we pushed on actually. And then like it grew to like 50 the next year and then like 100 the next year. And so I think it was, people had a really good time. Like it was really fun, I think, for everybody involved in like serving and preparing for it as well. And I think like, I know this is not what you asked, but I think one of the best parts of this is I remember after doing it a couple years, like I would walk around the neighborhood and I would see families that I knew and we would say hi to each other. Like this is like on Wednesday afternoon, you know, I'd just be walking around to see. And then like I would see people at the apartment complex and we'd say hi and like I know their kids' names and like that was super awesome. Like I love that part of ministry. But I will tell you that after doing this some time and we had some people from the neighborhood coming to church, I know that there were some concerns that were brought up to me. And I don't have to go into detail, but again, it's the idea versus the reality. And we need to prepare that if we like the idea and we're going to make efforts toward it, like we can't stop there. We actually have to change within the church and within the leadership, and we need to be strategic so that if people actually come, which is what we want, that they feel a sense of belonging in the church.
Yeah, and I think, that was one of my favorite parts of the ministry I was doing in LA Central was Block Party and VBS. And, you know, when I got there, it was established to the point where it was just assumed we would do it every year. And that was the benefit I reaped from what Chris did, was because, again, that initial part where the reality and the idea that doesn't quite match up, plus just the logistics of starting something, launching something like this, when you get over it, when you get over that hump, it becomes an embedded part of your ministry, it becomes part of your identity as a church. Then it becomes easier to grow. And that was my hope, was to kind of grow the Block Party into something bigger. And then, you know, COVID happened and other things. But I mean, that's the hope, right? You start with something and then you get over that initial hump. And then once it becomes a part of what you do, now you hope to make it bigger and expand.
I have this theory that it takes 3 years. You have to do something for 3 years for it to be kind of embedded and become a part of the culture. And I think once you can do those things and do it in a certain way, then the expectation is to continue to do it and to continue to do it in the way that you did it. Yeah. So just a quick little piece of teaching for any of our church leaders who want to implement something. I think you pitch it, you go for it, and then you commit to it for a few years and then see if it has legs.
So to kind of pivot, we mentioned in the top of the show, there's two kind of sporting events we want to go over. The first one was the World Cup. The second one is the New York Knicks winning the NBA championship, which seems on like surface level, like, why are you guys talking about the Knicks? Neither of us are Knicks fans. Neither of us are from New York. But this moment has kind of, again, like I mentioned, transcended into larger pop culture, where people who are not interested in basketball or follow basketball were following this story because it's been, I think I want to say almost 53 years since the Knicks won a championship.
Wow.
Basketball and New York City, there's a very deep connection, like on a cultural level. It's embedded into the culture of the city. Most New York fans, especially the ones that I know and grew up with, for them, basketball was always like the most important. Which is not really the case for a lot of places, but in New York, it's like basketball is king, and then of basketball, like everyone is a Knicks fan. I have yet to meet a Brooklyn Nets fan. I don't think they exist. For me, it's like, who do I find more, Clippers fans or Nets fans? I found Clippers fans. I have never met a Nets fan. And so this story kind of transcended into kind of national media and pop culture. And Chris came across a post that kind of describes this feeling, this moment of when fans come together for one big moment. And we wanted to kind of springboard and talk about that because we feel like that relates to our churches. So, Chris, you want to share with us the new topic or new theme you discovered?
Yeah, it's called collective effervescence. And
Okay.
it's the spirit, and it describes the moment when a ton of people, hundreds, thousands, millions of people are all like into the same thing and want the same thing. And it is this feeling of being connected to something that is much larger than you, and then you're brought closer to each other, and as you strive for and hope for the same outcome. And so obviously in sports, that's really easy to imagine. You know, we all love this team, and like you and I have differences, like politically we're different, but we both love the Knicks, and we both want the Knicks to succeed, and we want to win the championship. And like that joy of being connected to something larger than you, how it transcends like all the differences of age, background, gender, socioeconomics, like none of that matters anymore because we are all about this one thing. And like I've experienced it too, again in sports. And so I'm a big Green Bay Packers fan. And so my first time going to Lambeau Field in 2008, I was watching the game. It was against the Colts. And like, unfortunately, I had to go to the bathroom during the game, right? And like this is my first like live NFL game. I didn't want to go, but I had to go because I didn't want to ruin Lambeau Field, you know? So I went to the bathroom, and there's a bunch of people in there, and they have a speaker doing the play-by-play and calling the game. And while I was in the bathroom, the Packers picked off Peyton Manning, and there was an interception. And in the bathroom, everyone started cheering and high-fiving each other in the bathroom. Like, we didn't even wash our hands, but we're like high-fiving, and we're like, yeah, you know, and like it's that's a small version, but this is that moment that Knicks fans, you know, across the globe are experiencing right now. And it's this very special thing that is I think a really big deal, because I think people feel like we need stuff like this. Like the way the world is going, with all the division that we're facing and all the unknown and uncertainty we have with our country and the world, like to come together to see this is like a beautiful moment. Just like, you know, we talked about the World Cup. It is so great to have this experience together.
And I think the post you mentioned, it used this one word that I really like, is it's coming together for this one moment, and it said like that brings hope,
Yeah.
right? And essentially that is what sports is you have a hope that you're going to win a game, a series, or a championship. And when you don't have that hope, it's hard to watch. As someone who watched a team that had no hope for a number of years, it's hard to. I didn't watch Commanders games for the longest time, or if I did, I just kind of have it on the background. I wasn't invested. And then when like hope re-entered, it changed everything, to the shock of my wife, who had not experienced this before. And so, yeah, I think it is this bringing collective of people coming together for this thing that you're hoping will happen, or the thing that brings hope. And I'm sure you can see the connecting line between that and church, how collective effervescence exists in sports, but can also exist in our churches.
Yeah, I think it points to that, the desire for this, but also like the reality of it, points to this part of us, I think, as human beings longing for something like this. That we long to not only have hope, but we long to have hope with other people. Like we want to hope together for something, and like hope that is not shared, or hope that we just hold to ourselves is not as enjoyable and beautiful when a large group of people hope together. And like that's kind of what the church is supposed to be, right? It's a group of people who are different, who like in the early church were Greeks and Romans and Jews and Ethiopians and Africans, but they all have this one hope, and so they come together, and that hope transcends all the differences. And it's the same thing that we want our churches to be, a place where we all have this one thing in common, Jesus and the hope he brings. And so it doesn't matter if you're Republican, or it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or progressive or conservative, or you're Mexican or Korean, or whether you're rich or poor, like man or woman, it doesn't matter, because we are all connected to something far bigger than all of that. And like it brings us together and it gives us hope. And like, I guess I want to see that spirit in our churches.
Yeah, because the sports part of it, while it's great in the moment, it doesn't. There's no lasting effect, really. You know, the moment you described in the bathroom, it was amazing in the moment, but
Yeah.
like, do you derive hope from it today? High fiving guys in the bathroom without washing your hands.
Yeah, no. And I remember, so back in 2010, the Packers won the Super Bowl. And Jason, you were there with me in that moment. And I remember like we were at some random sports bar, I think in Indiana or something, or in Southwest
Yes.
Michigan. Like there was nobody there. It was you, me, and like one other like Steelers fan or something
Yeah.
like that. Like the projector was kind of like whatever.
I
Like,
was like
I don't
washed
know.
out,
The
cut
food
out
wasn't that
times.
great. And so the Packers won that Super Bowl. And like it was great that you were there. Like it would have been way more lame if I was by myself and just like, yay, cheering us on. And I was happy and I was like thrilled. This is like the first Packers Super Bowl win that when I'm like an adult and like truly know what's going, truly invested in the team. A week later, 2 weeks later, it didn't do much to my life anymore. You know, I changed my Facebook profile to say world champs. I like did those things. But like you said, like the impact and the effect of it wore off. And yeah, that joy and that effervescence, like sodas and sparkling waters, they go flat eventually.
Right.
And that's what it did for me too. And so I think what we need to realize is it points to this desire that we have. But again, as we often know, the things that the world offers, they just don't last and they are impermanent. And yeah, they're great, but they will eventually fade away.
Yeah, and I think it points to the importance of church, right? I think especially with the younger generation, there is more of I want to say privatization of faith. What I mean by that is younger people don't feel the need to go to church to access their faith, which kind of on a very baseline kind of philosophical level, I think is good. Like they're kind of accessing their faith personally without needing other people, entities. But it becomes difficult because that's only a part of faith. It does require a collective. And I'm not saying to experience that you have to go to church. I do think there are other avenues in which to experience collective effervescence on a spiritual level without having to go into a church. But it does require people, right? And I think the great thing about collective effervescence in a church is it is supposed to be lasting, right? And using the metaphor of the water, soda water goes flat. And, in the Bible, Jesus references everlasting water. And that is kind of the purpose of this church. And that's why it's so important for us to share that with people who don't have it. Because instead of trying to find the next thing that gives you hope, we have this thing that hopefully gives you hope on a sustained level forever. And we need to share that with the people who don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot think of a better way to end this episode, Jason. I think that was beautiful. That is what we're trying to do, and that's what we want to experience in our churches.
Yeah, and so it's an encouragement for you in your churches, in your local church potlucks to talk about it. You're gonna be talking about the World Cup, like it's inevitable, especially in our Korean churches. And kind of bring this idea up, like, hey, I heard this awesome podcast, and they brought this idea up, and hopefully that will help our churches to understand the magnitude of the responsibility it holds to share this hope to the people who don't have it, and kind of expand the cultural effervescence beyond just the people who are members at our church.
Jason, is the next episode the East Coast Camp Meeting episode? Is that what you're doing?
I believe so. I am trying to figure out the technical elements of it because the East Coast is on the other side of the country from me. I have to bring stuff, and so I'm also bringing my son with me. And so we'll have to kind of figure out the technical elements.
Yeah, I'm only bringing that up because I know I'm very interested in that episode. I went to East Coast camp meeting once while I was in seminaries, but it's like I hear it's very different than West Coast camp meeting. So I'm really interested in what you share and what East Coast camp meeting is like. I think a lot of people on the West Coast are actually pretty curious too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a podcast we are going to do. Whether it's going to happen the next episode or not remains to be seen. But I am going for the sole purpose, really, of doing a podcast about the East Coast and kind of promoting. So if you are someone on the East Coast who's listening to this podcast, I will be there. So please find me. Tell a friend. We want this podcast to unite, again, like we said, both coasts in our mission. So thank you again for listening. We hope this kind of triggered certain thoughts and discussions that can happen in your local church. Continue to subscribe, and yeah, thanks again for spending this time with us.